You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. A tremor seized me the first time I registered the shape inhabiting our spare room. Light spilled like thin milk from the hallway, pooling on the floorboards and stretching into the seeming void. Yet something stood defiant within it. A compact shadow, dense against the gloom, perhaps reaching my waist. I felt, more than saw, its attention swivel towards me, a palpable weight in the air, though no face, no features resolved themselves. My heart vaulted. A nervous energy danced in my fingertips. I blinked, a reflex against the impossible, and it was gone. Erased, I remained, hand clamped to the brass doorknob, staring into mere emptiness. A neatly made bed, a sturdy chest of drawers, an old lamp perched on the nightstand. But the air, it possessed a chill distinct from the rest of the house, an invasive presence. I remember the dry click in my throat as I swallowed, the flick of the overhead switch flooding the room with sterile light. I edged inside, one foot still anchored in the corridor, poised for retreat. Nothing. Only that profound, silent cold and the amplified echo of my own breathing. Clara and I had taken possession of this house a year prior. 3 bedrooms lined the upper floor, though only 2 truly served us. The third, the spare room, lay sequestered at the hallway's terminus, adjacent to the bathroom. Its single window overlooked the backyard, shrouded by heavy drapes. Within stood a solitary bed, an heirloom from Clara's parents. We habitually kept its door shut. Overnight guests were a rarity. Even Clara's brother, Marcus, and his wife preferred the yielding comfort of the living room sofa during their visits. An unspoken pact seemed to exist. That room remained unclaimed. Within a month of settling in, a subtle wrongness began to assert itself. Passing its closed door elicited a faint, involuntary shiver. Initially, I rationalized it. A draft, perhaps, or the vagaries of the air conditioning. Yet inspections revealed nothing amiss with vents or insulation. Everything was sound. Still, the temperature within that specific space felt intrinsically off-kilter. Weeks bled into months before I conceded it wasn't solely my perception. Clara, too, grew unsettled. She spoke of hearing faint susurrations from behind the door while cleaning the hall, the whisper of shifting sheets, the minute groan of floorboards under weightless pressure. She'd push the door open, step across the threshold, and wait, listening intently. Silence would inevitably reclaim the space. Gooseflesh prickled her arms, she confessed. I feigned nonchalance, unwilling to amplify her anxiety, but deep down, proximity to that door became an ordeal. Each approach cinched a knot low in my gut. One night, suspended in the dead hour near 3, the need for the bathroom pulled me from sleep. The hallway stretched before me, a corridor of shadows. Then I heard it, a sound like whispering emanating from the spare room. Not distinct words, but a low, sibilant murmur, as if someone were confiding secrets to the walls. My first drowsy thought was Clara, perhaps searching for misplaced linen, but she lay beside me, breathing the deep, even rhythm of undisturbed sleep. A familiar tightness constricted my chest, that visceral clench signaling something profoundly awry. I stood immobile a few feet from the spare room door. My hand drifted towards the knob, hesitated. Faintly, unmistakably, the murmur breathed again. I pushed the door inward. Corridor light sliced across the bed. The armchair slumped in the corner, the dresser standing sentinel against the far wall. At first glance, emptiness reigned. Then, near the foot of the bed, my gaze snagged on a form. Small, indistinct, a huddled knot of darkness barely discernible in the gloom. A wave of absolute cold surged through me, leaching the moisture from my mouth. For a heartbeat, paralysis claimed me. I blinked, and like smoke, it dissipated. No sound, no rush of displaced air. An erasure. I lingered, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, loud enough, I feared, to wake Clara. Snapping on the overhead light, I scanned every corner, peered beneath the bed. Nothing. I backed out slowly, killed the light, and retreated hastily to our bedroom. The silence of the house suddenly immense, deafening. Sleep refused to return. I lay listening, every nerve taut, until dawn painted the windows gray. The following morning, I compelled myself to return. Curtains drawn, lamp dormant, all as expected. Yet the bedspread was disturbed, crumpled as if by restless weight. I knew its usual state. Clara always smoothed the coverlet with meticulous care. This morning, it looked undeniably used. I summoned Clara. She entered, her gaze falling upon the bed, a frown etching itself between her brows. "Had I been in here during the night?" she inquired. I recounted the previous hour's events. Her eyes widened slightly as she absorbed my words, her glance sweeping the room's quiet corners. She approached the bed, smoothed the coverlet with automatic gestures, her hand trailing along the edge. Then she touched the pillow. It retained a faint warmth, a residual intimacy, as if a head had recently rested there. She offered no comment, merely met my gaze with a troubled expression before turning and walking out. That day, I sought conversation with a couple of the long-standing residents on our street, the Hendersons. Did they recall anything noteworthy about our house's past? They spoke of the previous owner, a solitary woman. Whispers circulated, they admitted, concerning some personal tragedy, though specifics remained elusive, buried under layers of time and neighborhood gossip. Perhaps the details were lost, or perhaps they were simply discreet. Vague allusions to old sorrows, a weight of history clinging to the property, it was sufficient to sharpen the edge of my unease. Was some echo, some lingering energy imprinted on the place? I wasn't predisposed to believe in the spectral, yet the phenomena we experienced defied easy explanation. A few evenings later, Clara had drifted off on the sofa around midnight while I watched television. From the hallway, a sound arose. Movement. Soft, furtive padding. My immediate thought. Marcus, perhaps, stopping by unexpectedly? But we were alone. I muted the television, straining to hear. The steps were measured, cautious. Then came a distinct thump, soft yet definite, like something lightly impacting the spare room door from within. My throat constricted. That familiar icy tension bloomed in my chest. Rising, I moved towards the hallway. The door remained closed, yet an undeniable sensation persisted. Presence on the other side. I flung it open abruptly. Light from the living room spilled onto the floorboards. The armchair in the corner was subtly askew, nudged from its usual position. Neither Clara nor I frequented the room enough to disturb the furniture. It was inexplicable. Crossing the threshold, I laid a hand on the chair's wooden back. It felt unnaturally cold, like touching marble. I stood there for a minute, scanning the walls, the ceiling, the bed. No sign of intrusion. I nudged the chair back to its proper angle, leaving the overhead light burning as I departed. Sleep became a shallow, fragile thing after that. The smallest creak, the sigh of settling timbers, would jolt me awake, anticipating whispers, bracing for that fleeting silhouette. Occasionally, I'd rise and patrol the hallway, checking the spare room door simply to quell the rising anxiety. The temperature differential remained constant, like stepping across an invisible boundary into refrigerated air. Clara confessed her own persistent disquiet when passing the door, though she endeavored to dismiss it. "Just a room," she'd murmured, no need to unravel over odd noises. Yet, a week later, she admitted to troubled dreams. Fragments of weeping, she described, a voice calling out in the darkness, the words dissolving upon waking. It felt proximate, she whispered, as though the source were right beside her. She'd awaken sometimes with damp cheeks, bewildered by unshed tears. This admission disturbed me profoundly. Clara, ever the pragmatist, was not easily rattled. Witnessing her composure, Frey amplified my own unease. I proposed populating the room, storing boxes there, perhaps leaving a light on constantly to see if the atmosphere shifted. Clara agreed. We relocated some old belongings, stacking plastic storage bins against the walls, and plugged in a small lamp, leaving its soft glow to push back the shadows. For 2 nights, an unnerving quiet prevailed. On the 3rd morning, however, the lamp was extinguished, though I distinctly recalled leaving it illuminated. I checked the bulb, intact. I toggled the switch. It flared to life without issue. A permanent knot seemed to have taken residence in my stomach whenever I traversed the hallway, my breath catching involuntarily. Elsewhere, the house retained its comfort. The cozy familiarity of the living room, the sanctuary of our bedroom, the warm heart of the kitchen. Only that spare room radiated dissonance. Even Marcus and Lena now demurred when offered the bed, opting for the sofa with vague excuses. "We're fine out here," they'd say, their eyes flicking momentarily towards the closed door at the end of the hall. One evening, determined, I positioned myself in the hallway to simply watch the door. It felt absurd, yet I needed to know if observation itself provoked a reaction. Clara was working late. The house hummed only with the refrigerator's low thrum. I stood sentinel for perhaps 15 minutes, gaze fixed. At one point I detected a faint scratching. Delicate, insistent, almost like fingernails tracing patterns on wood or plaster, but barely audible. Perspiration beaded on my palms. I opened the door once more. Hallway light flooded the space. The scratching ceased instantly. The bins remained stacked, undisturbed. The bedspread lay smooth. I entered, flicking on the overhead light. My breath hitched. The armchair was turned again. Only slightly, but undeniably shifted. Approaching it, I placed my hand on the wood, encountering that familiar, striking coldness, as if it had been subtly pulled away from the corner. I shoved it back with more force than necessary, turned, and fled the room, my mind racing. Was the house rearranging itself? Or was my own perception becoming unmoored? That night I broached the subject with Clara. Perhaps we should consult someone, an expert, not in ghosts, but in houses. An inspector maybe, someone adept at identifying drafts, structural quirks, wiring faults. She readily consented. We contacted a local man, a Mr. Davies, reputed for diagnosing elusive household issues, cold spots, hidden leaks, peculiar anomalies. He arrived, methodical and thorough, testing insulation, scanning for mold, examining the HVAC system, probing walls for moisture or hidden fissures. His verdict: the house was in impeccable condition. He could offer no logical physical explanation for the persistent chill confined to that single room. He departed, leaving us with our mystery deepened, not resolved. In the wake of his visit, I tried to impose normalcy, to convince myself it was all subjective, explainable. The subsequent nights passed quietly. Sleep, blessedly, returned with less interruption. Then, perhaps a week later, around 1 a.m, I awoke abruptly, that familiar electric tingling prickling my skin. My body's intuition screamed alarm before my conscious mind registered why. I lay still, listening. The house breathed silence around me. Clara slept soundly, her breathing soft and even beside me. Compelled by an unseen force, I rose and padded into the hallway, uncertain of my own purpose. That's when I heard it, the whisper, faint but undeniable, seeming to originate just beyond the wood of the spare room door. My pulse leaped, drumming against my ears. My hands grew clammy. Reaching for the knob, I turned it with excruciating slowness. The door groaned open, spilling light across the floor. Bed, dresser, lamp, the familiar tableau. I stepped inside. The whispering died. My own breath plumed visibly in the air, a winter fog in the midst of temperate night, a phenomenon exclusive to this space. My eyes darted, scanning corners, walls, the chair. Then by the window, a flicker of movement. A shape materialized. Small, ill-defined, more absence than presence against the faint exterior light filtering through the drapes. I froze, my breathing shallow, ragged. I blinked. It vanished. In that precise instant, the lamp on the nightstand flickered erratically. The bulb hummed a final discordant note, then winked into darkness, plunging that corner into absolute black. I recoiled, backing hastily from the room, pulling the door shut behind me. I lay awake until sunrise, eyes wide in the darkness, sweat cooling on my skin, my heart lodged painfully in my throat. The image of that figure by the window burned behind my eyelids, intertwined with the neighbors' fragmented tales of sorrow. Connection or coincidence, the chilling occurrences in that room felt terrifyingly real. Clara stirred around 7. Seeing my face, she asked quietly if I was all right. I could only shake my head. "I can't deal with that room anymore, Clara," I finally managed, the words thick. "I don't want to go in there alone." She looked at me, a deep understanding in her eyes, and nodded slowly. She felt it too. Life attempts to proceed. We try mostly to ignore it, but the hallway remains a gauntlet. Every passage past that door triggers the cold, uneasy spike deep in my gut. The house, our home, feels subtly compromised. I find myself unconsciously quickening my pace near the end of the hall, avoiding those final few steps. If I need something from the linen closet nearby, the retrieval is swift, almost furtive. Clara mirrors this behavior, the relief washing over me each time I pass the door without incident, without sound or sight, is potent, telling. Presently, the door remains perpetually shut. A palpable tension suffuses the corridor, thickening noticeably after dark. Sometimes, soft creaks filter from within. Sometimes, I imagine a flicker of shadow beneath the door's narrow gap, but I force myself to dismiss it. Clara and I rarely discuss it now. Words feel inadequate, answers non-existent, and the fear itself is a burden best left unspoken. We haven't confided in many. Disbelief feels dismissive, yet too much belief feels like inviting something worse. All I know, with unshakable certainty, is that the spare room feels occupied, regardless of its physical emptiness. The bed still occasionally acquires its rumpled state. The chair continues its silent, incremental shifts. The air within still bites with an unnatural chill when the threshold is breached, and the whispers persist, faint visitations in the deep night, always seeming to hover just near the door. Explanation eludes me. I only know I am not inventing this. Something resides in there, something that seems disinclined to leave. For now, we coexist. Sometimes I lock the door, a futile gesture against the intangible. We contemplate changes, fresh paint, different furniture, repurposing the space into an office. But a deeper intuition whispers that such cosmetic alterations will prove useless. That room feels claimed, possessed by something I glimpse only fleetingly, something I cannot grasp. Every night I surrender to sleep, hoping for silence, praying not to hear that soft, sibilant voice or perceive that small, waiting shape. Every morning, I awaken with a surge of relief that the door remains closed, yet the feeling of absolute safety remains elusive. I suspect it always will. It began, as unsettling things often do, subtly. A Tuesday evening, October bleeding into the air outside my windows. Within the quietude of my study, amidst the scent of old paper and simmering frustration over work correspondence, the familiar cadence faltered. The grandfather clock, that towering rosewood sentinel whose resonant pronouncements had measured out 15 years of my life, abruptly choked on its own chime. A profound silence descended, sharp and arresting. My gaze lifted from the laptop's sterile glow towards the chronometer. Its ornate hands, usually so resolute, were paralyzed at 11:58 p.m. An absurdity, given the digital numerals on my phone declared it merely 7:43 p.m. Levering myself from the depths of the worn leather armchair, I crossed the room. The clock loomed, a relic of inherited time. Its glass door swung open with a soft click, revealing the intricate face. Beneath my fingertips, the brass hands felt unnaturally cold as I guided them back to their proper station. The moment the door clicked shut, the rhythmic heartbeat, that familiar tick-tock, resumed its steady pulse. I returned to my emails. Scarcely 20 minutes elapsed before the chimes erupted once more. The deep, sonorous declaration of midnight. A frown tightened my brow. My phone confirmed 8:03 p.m. Yet the clock face insisted otherwise. Its hands once again converged at the apex, mocking my earlier intervention. A purely mechanical caprice, I assured myself, resolving to summon the horologist come morning. Again, I performed the adjustment, this time observing the intricate dance of gears and springs with heightened attention. This clock wasn't merely furniture. It was lineage made tangible, passed from grandfather Armin to my father, and finally to me when Dad decamped to Florida's sun-drenched languor. Its maintenance had always been meticulous, entrusted periodically to a specialist. Never, in all its years, had it exhibited such errant behavior. Morning light revealed the clock defiant, frozen yet again at midnight. But something else snagged my attention, a detail overlooked in the dimness of the previous night. Faint, hairline scratches marring the enamel face. They weren't deep fissures, more like deliberate etches, forming a peculiar constellation around the Roman numeral 12. I was utterly certain they hadn't been there before. My finger traced the delicate indentations, a violation against the otherwise pristine surface. I placed a call to the downtown establishment, reaching Mr. Abernathy, the elderly artisan whose skilled hands had previously tended to the clock's needs. His voice, usually brimming with methodical confidence, held a note of bewilderment as I described the twin anomalies, the temporal jumps, and the inexplicable markings. He agreed a visit was warranted, promising to arrive the next day. That night became a vigil, laptop perched on the coffee table, a potent brew of coffee steaming beside it. I settled in, anticipating a tedious evening punctuated only by the rhythmic swing of the pendulum. All proceeded with deceptive normalcy until the minute hand crept towards 11:57 p.m. Then, the cadence shifted. The tick-tock slowed, grew ponderous, each beat resonating like footfalls on ancient, unseen stairs. A prickle of unease traced its way up my spine. The very air in the room seemed to thin, growing colder by palpable degrees. The minute hand crawled towards the midnight hour with excruciating deliberation. At 11:59, the pendulum's arc became erratic. Its usually hypnotic, metronomic swing devolved into unpredictable spasms, sometimes wide and languid, sometimes short and frantic. The sound warped too, shedding the familiar tick-tock for a grating metallic scrape that vibrated unpleasantly behind my teeth. My knuckles whitened on the armchair's rests, eyes locked on the unfolding strangeness. The second hand shuddered and jerked its way around the dial. As it finally kissed the 12, no chime sounded. Instead, a noise like fingernails dragged violently across slate ripped through the silence. The hands spun backward, a dizzying counterclockwise blur, finally arresting their motion, once again, at midnight. I lurched to my feet, heart hammering against my ribs, and approached the clock. Fresh scratches scarred the face, deeper now, more insistent. They coalesced into patterns hinting at script, yet belonging to no alphabet I could decipher. My hand trembled as I reached out, only to recoil from the glass. It was glacial, radiating an impossible cold. I retreated, unnerved. The pendulum hung utterly still, yet a low, vibrational hum emanated from the clock's casing, a frequency that resonated painfully in my dental fillings. The air immediately surrounding the timepiece shimmered, distorting like heat haze rising from summer asphalt. The remainder of the night found me huddled on the sofa, a reluctant sentinel watching the frozen clock, the uncanny hum persisting until the first blush of dawn, whereupon it abruptly ceased, the clock resuming its normal function as if the preceding hours had been mere illusion. Mr. Abernathy arrived precisely at 9, a compact man whose thick spectacles magnified eyes, accustomed to minute detail, his hands bearing the testament of decades spent coaxing life back into intricate mechanisms. I recounted the night's bizarre events while he bent to scrutinize the clock face. "These marks," he murmured, adjusting his glasses, his voice hushed with professional curiosity. "They are most peculiar. The pattern, it suggests they originated from within the clock, not externally." Impossible, I countered. There's nothing inside capable of etching the enamel. Mr. Abernathy opened the main casing, his examination of the internal workings commencing, his brow furrowed progressively deeper. The gears, the escapement, all are immaculate, he reported, perplexed. Better than immaculate, truth be told. There's virtually no wear, which defies logic for an instrument of this vintage. He produced a jeweler's loupe, leaning closer. And these scratches, they aren't random scrawls. Observe. He indicated a specific whorl near the ditonth. This precise configuration repeats itself, exactly 4 times around the dial. I leaned in, following his pointing finger. He was correct. What had appeared as chaotic scarring now resolved into a complex geometric motif, meticulously replicated. A knot of anxiety tightened in my gut. I realized with a jolt that this level of intricate detail hadn't been present that morning. These marks were newer still. Mr. Abernathy continued his methodical exploration, accessing compartments and mechanisms whose existence I hadn't suspected. After nearly an hour, he straightened, wiping his brow with a neatly folded handkerchief. 35 years, he sighed, his usual certainty replaced by a profound bafflement. 35 years tending to timepieces, and I've encountered nothing remotely like this. Mechanically, it is flawless, unnaturally so. But these markings, he shook his head, they are beyond my ken, and there is one thing more. He reached carefully into the clock's depths, between 2 gleaming gears, and extracted a small folded object. It was a piece of parchment, brittle and yellowed with apparent age, creased into a tight square. Inscribed upon it were the same cryptic symbols that marred the clock face. This was secreted within, Mr. Abernathy stated, offering it to me. It appears ancient, yet it cannot have resided there long. It would have irrevocably jammed the works. I accepted the fragile paper gingerly. As my eyes traced the alien glyphs, they seemed to shimmer, almost writhe upon the surface. A dull ache began to pulse behind my temples. I quickly placed the parchment on the coffee table. Mr. Abernathy packed his instruments with deliberate slowness. I cannot mend what isn't demonstrably broken, Mr. Vance, he said finally. My recommendation: seek consultation elsewhere. Perhaps someone whose expertise extends to the more esoteric anomalies. His departure left me alone with the ticking clock and the cryptic parchment. The rhythmic sound seemed amplified now, insistent, filling the silence. Despite the burgeoning headache, I picked up the paper again, compelling myself to study the symbols. They tugged at a thread of memory, a familiarity I couldn't quite grasp. The afternoon dissolved into fruitless online searches for arcane horology and undeciphered scripts. Nothing mirrored the unsettling reality residing in my living room. As dusk bled into evening, a palpable anxiety thickened the air. The clock's ticking became omnipresent, a relentless metronome drowning out the world beyond my walls. By 11:57 p.m., I was prepared. A video camera stood sentinel on its tripod, lens aimed squarely at the clock face. My phone, set to record audio, rested nearby. From my armchair, I watched through the camera's small screen as the minute hand embarked on its fateful journey towards Dordogne. The now familiar sequence initiated. The slowing cadence, the precipitous drop in temperature, the pendulum's lunatic dance. But tonight held a new development. As the second hand reached its zenith, the arcane scratches on the clock face began to luminesce, suffused with a faint, ethereal blue light. The humming returned, deeper now, and strangely modulated. It possessed a pattern, an unsettling semblance of speech. On the coffee table, the ancient parchment vibrated sympathetically, its own markings mirroring the clock's cold blue fire. Abruptly, the video camera winked out. My phone screen went dead. The room plunged into absolute darkness, save for the incandescent glyphs burning on the clock and the paper. The hum intensified, escalating into a pressure that pushed against my eardrums. Of its own volition, the clock's case door swung silently open. The pendulum was still, but the space behind it, it was wrong. It seemed impossibly deep, a pocket of darkness swallowing the light, suggesting depths far exceeding the physical confines of the rosewood case. The cerulean glow cast distorted shadows that writhed and shifted in ways utterly alien to the laws of light. Raw instinct screamed at me to flee, yet my limbs were leaden, held fast by an unseen force. The humming had become physically palpable, pressing against my skin like a tangible wave. On the paper, the glowing symbols flowed and reformed, coalescing into patterns that defied focus, slipping away just as comprehension seemed near. Then, as swiftly as it began, it ceased. Power surged back, bathing the room in ordinary light. My electronics flickered back to life. The clock resumed its placid ticking, its hands indicating the correct time, 12:01 a.m. The luminescence on the clock face and the parchment vanished, but the markings themselves had transmuted. They now formed a stark, clear message in unambiguous English. Time is not linear. The door is opening. The remainder of that fractured night was spent chasing digital ghosts, scouring the internet for mentions of those chilling words, for parallel experiences, for any rational framework. I found only whispers, fragmented discussions on temporal paradoxes, and the fringes of dimensional physics. The conviction grew. This transcended mere mechanical failure. I was confronting something far more fundamental. The following day, I contacted several universities, navigating skepticism and polite dismissals, until one physicist, Dr. Evelyn Reed, expressed cautious interest. She arrived that afternoon, armed with an array of sophisticated instruments. Dr. Reed dedicated hours to scanning, measuring, recording. Her devices registered anomalous energy fields localized around the clock, strongest near the glyphs. The ambient temperature surrounding the timepiece remained consistently 3 degrees cooler than the rest of the room, defying even direct sunlight. "The readings are extraordinary," she murmured, her gaze fixed on a fluctuating graph on her handheld device. A consistent pattern of electromagnetic disturbance, centered precisely here, yet conforming to no known emission signature. And these markings, she traced one with a gloved finger, they aren't conventional scratches. The material isn't displaced. It appears altered at a molecular level. As twilight deepened, Dr. Reed deployed more complex monitoring apparatus, her focus sharpening on the impending midnight transition. At 11:57, the uncanny ritual commenced anew. This time, her instruments captured the entire spectrum: the thermal plunge, the electromagnetic flux, the bizarre infrasonic frequencies. As midnight struck, the blue radiance bloomed again, but her sensors detected something more profound. a distinct warping of space immediately around the clock, like a ripple disturbing the placid surface of reality. "Incredible," she breathed, eyes wide behind her glasses, scanning the data streams. "These energy signatures, they align disturbingly well with theoretical models of temporal distortion. It's as if the clock itself is generating a localized chronoton field." The parchment on the table quivered once more. New glyphs materialized on both surfaces, slowly resolving into another stark message. "The convergence approaches. 3 days remain." Dr. Reed's equipment sputtered, overloaded, then went dark. Normalcy snapped back into place, leaving only the lingering chill and the ominous message. She packed her gear with hurried efficiency, promising a swift return with more specialized, hardened instruments. Sleep offered no refuge that night. The clock's ticking seemed to pursue me, echoing phantomly even in the farthest corners of the house. The parchment lay on the table, its symbols seeming to shift and rearrange themselves whenever caught in peripheral vision. The next morning, I dialed my father. The clock's history, its provenance. I needed anything he could recall. His voice, when he answered, was typically buoyant. "The old clock?" he echoed my query. "Grandfather Armin's treasure. Picked it up at some grand estate sale back in '47, I think. Never elaborated much on its origins, but..." A thoughtful pause. "He had his notions about it. Used to claim it helped him with big decisions. Said sometimes it showed him things, reflected in the glass. We mostly chalked it up to his dramatic flair." "Did anything peculiar ever happen, mechanically?" "Well, just one incident sticks out. Maybe a month before he passed, he phoned me, utterly frantic. Said the clock was trying to impart something vital. I drove straight over but found him calm, everything seemingly ordinary, clock ticking away perfectly. He never brought it up again." I thanked him, the receiver clicking back into its cradle, my thoughts racing. Dr. Reed returned within the hour, accompanied by equipment that looked more suited to a particle accelerator lab than a living room. The day became a whirlwind of readings, complex calculations, and hushed, intense video consultations with unseen colleagues. Overnight, the glyphs on the clock face had proliferated, spreading like an intricate phosphorescent ivy across the entire dial. As midnight loomed again, we stood ready. The sequence unfolded, but the blue glow was fiercer tonight, the hum possessing a new urgency, a higher pitch. The void behind the pendulum seemed to stretch, yawning into impossible blackness. Fresh symbols blazed into existence. 2 days until the paths align. The choice must be made. Dr. Reed's advanced instruments captured unprecedented data. The spatial distortion had intensified, forming what she breathlessly termed a nascent temporal vortex, centered on the pendulum's anchor point. The room temperature plummeted towards freezing. "These metrics are completely off-scale," she declared, her voice tight with a mixture of apprehension and scientific ecstasy. "The energy patterns are unequivocally consistent with theoretical frameworks for significant time dilation. Julian, this clock appears to be functioning as a bridge, a conduit between temporal planes." The penultimate day dissolved into a haze of mounting strangeness. Time itself seemed to lose its footing within the house. Watches and digital displays refused to synchronize. The clock's ticking grew erratic, accelerating and decelerating unpredictably. objects placed near it developed a subtle vibration. Compasses spun uselessly within a 10-foot radius. The hum emanating from the rosewood case was now constant, a low, pervasive thrum that resonated in the window panes. That night's message was starker, colder. Tomorrow at midnight the door opens. Step through or stay behind. Dr. Reed's instruments confirmed the temporal distortion was approaching critical levels, following a steep exponential curve. The space behind the pendulum seemed almost to breathe, expanding and contracting like some impossible organism. The glyphs on both clock and parchment pulsed faintly with blue light, even in the daylight hours. "Whatever process is underway," Dr. Reed stated grimly, "it's culminating. According to these projections, the energy readings will peak precisely at midnight tomorrow." The final day dawned under an atmosphere thick with unreality. The very fabric of the house felt thin. The constant hum from the grandfather clock vibrated through the floorboards. As midnight drew inexorably closer, Dr. Reed's equipment registered temporal stresses reaching levels previously confined to theoretical papers. The blue luminescence from the glyphs intensified, bathing the room in an otherworldly glow bright enough to read by. The space behind the pendulum no longer hinted at depth. It was depth, a swirling vortex where darkness and light chased each other in impossible geometries. At 11:59, a final inscription burned itself onto the clock face and the waiting parchment. "The choice is yours. Through the door lies a different path, a chance to explore what time truly means. Stay, and the door closes forever." The pendulum ceased its motion. The vortex stabilized, coalescing into a shimmering archway composed of pure, swirling energy. Peering into it, I glimpsed not a specific place, but the potential of places. Timelines branching like luminous cosmic trees, flowing and merging according to rules I could barely intuit. Dr. Reed, though her instruments dutifully recorded everything, stood transfixed, her scientific detachment momentarily overwhelmed. "This is it," she whispered, awestruck. "A verifiable temporal gateway. The implications, they rewrite physics." I stood before the clock, the ancient wood vibrating against my outstretched hand, feeling the undeniable pull of the vortex. The choice lay before me, stark and absolute. Step into the unknown, into the heart of time itself, or remain tethered to the familiar sequence of days. The hum had transformed into an intricate, silent song, a siren call promising wonders beyond human comprehension. Yet, standing on that precipice, my thoughts turned grounded. My life, this house, my father, Grandfather Armin and his cryptic pronouncements. The weight of my own, linear existence. Choices made, paths irrevocably taken. The seconds bled away. The vortex pulsed, expectant. At the precise stroke of midnight, my decision crystallized. I reached forward and firmly closed the glass door of the grandfather clock. With a sound like a distant, soft implosion of thunder, the vortex collapsed inward upon itself. The blue light extinguished instantly. The glyphs vanished from the clock face and the parchment, leaving not even a microscopic trace of their existence. The pendulum stirred, then resumed its steady, comforting swing. Tick-tock, tick-tock, parceling out the seconds of the new day. Dr. Reed's instruments registered a rapid dissipation of the anomalous energies, the spatial metrics returning to baseline. She looked at me, a complex understanding dawning in her eyes. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "the most profound discoveries are those that clarify where we truly belong." The clock has kept perfect time ever since. No more midnight leaps, no uncanny etchings, no shimmering doorways to other when. It stands, as it always has, a magnificent testament to bygone craftsmanship. Yet sometimes, in the profound stillness of late hours, caught in the reflection on the polished glass face, I think I see it, the faintest flicker of impossible blue. Or perhaps it's just a trick of the light, a reminder of the path not chosen, the mysteries folded away behind the familiar face of time. Dr. Reed eventually published a rigorously anonymized paper detailing anomalous localized temporal phenomena. It generated considerable debate within theoretical physics circles, though the event remains unique, inexplicable, and impossible to replicate. She visits occasionally, setting up her instruments, but the clock remains stubbornly, perfectly normal. The yellowed parchment with its cryptic script, gone, vanished utterly, like the scratches it mirrored. But the detailed notes I took, chronicling every bizarre occurrence, remain locked securely in my desk. Now and then, I retrieve them, tracing the narrative, reassuring myself it wasn't merely a fever dream born of stress and solitude. The clock ticks on. The memory remains indelible, a fracture in the otherwise seamless quiet of that first night. 1 o'clock ticked past midnight, the air thick and still within my small custodian's office, nestled near the ground floor's rear corridor. Only the incessant low hum of the fluorescent tubes overhead disturbed the building's profound slumber. Then, cleaving the silence, came the footfalls from the floor directly above. Not hurried nor languid, but possessing a measured, deliberate cadence. A cold tension seized my spine. My breath grew shallow, caught in my throat. I sat frozen, listening, parsing the air for trickery, for some mundane explanation. Yet the steps persisted, a rhythmic haunting for perhaps 30 seconds, before dissolving back into the quiet hum. A frantic check of the security monitors yielded nothing but screens awash in coruscating static. That was the genesis. My name is Elias. For nigh on 2 years, I've kept the night watch in this aging commercial edifice, a place whose daytime bustle of offices and small enterprises had dwindled significantly after the owner's rent hike the previous year. Now a mere handful of tenants remain, their doors shuttered by 6 or 7 each evening. Come midnight, the structure stands cavernous and vacant, save for myself and occasionally late stragglers in the second-floor shared workspace, though even they typically vanish by 10 or 11. After that, solitude is my only companion. Loneliness rarely troubles me. I am not built for easy company. My shift commences at 9 post-meridium, concluding at the pre-dawn hour of 5. The routine is uncomplicated. Rounds across each floor, verifying locked doors, ensuring no vagrant soul has sought refuge within its walls, the usual custodial liturgy. My station is a modest desk tucked away behind the main lobby, granting oversight of the security camera feeds. Nights previously were spent adrift in the glow of phone apps or skimming inconsequential articles online. But since the advent of the footsteps, a persistent unease has become my shadow. The second time it occurred, The clock showed perhaps 12:30. I'd just completed my second patrol, a ritual walk through the building's echoing spaces. Fetching a lukewarm coffee from the lobby vending machine, I returned to my office sanctuary. Minutes later, the familiar tread resumed, this time seeming to emanate from the third floor. A film of perspiration prickled my brow. Setting down the cup, I rose, flashlight clutched tight, and ascended the stairs. Each step upward felt leaden, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, breath coming quicker now. Reaching the third floor, I found only emptiness. The corridor stretched vacant under my flashlight's beam. I swept the light across corners, peered into the hollow darkness of restrooms. Nothing. Absolute silence reigned. Back in my office, rewinding the security footage revealed an anomaly. Every camera on the third floor displayed impenetrable static precisely during the interval I'd heard the steps. Feeds from all other floors remained starkly clear. It was then I grasped the insidious strangeness corrupting the surveillance system. Through subsequent nights, the footfalls intensified in frequency. Always post-midnight, sometimes 12:15, sometimes closer to 1. Their location varied, occasionally distant, echoing from the far end of the uppermost corridor. Other times so unnervingly close, I'd brace myself, expecting a figure to glide past my door. Each instant spurred me to investigate, flashlight beam cutting through shadows, only to find deserted hallways. And each time, the corresponding camera feeds dissolved into static snow. I tried reasoning it away. Electrical interference, the groans of an old structure settling, ancient pipes protesting the cold night air. Buildings possess their own nocturnal language of creaks and sighs, I knew. But these were no random protests. These were distinct footfalls, one after the other, imbued with that same steady pace. A pattern began to emerge. A stretch of walking, a pause, more walking, another pause. It felt disconcertingly like someone else was mirroring my own patrols. Sleep became elusive after a week of this spectral cadence. Daylight hours found me lying abed, haunted by visions of empty corridors and the phantom echo of steps. My attempt to confide in my boss was met with dismissive concern. He attributed it to overwork. So, I ceased mentioning it, resolving to unravel this mystery alone. One night, determined to capture tangible proof, to assure myself I wasn't fracturing, I positioned my phone on the third floor, aiming its lens down the central corridor. I initiated recording and retreated downstairs to wait. Around 1 a.m., they began again, directly overhead, on the third floor. I waited, pulse hammering, until silence returned, then hurried back upstairs to retrieve my device. Playing the recording, however, revealed only 30 seconds of normalcy before the screen went black, the audio degrading into a high-pitched electronic whine precisely when the footsteps should have begun. A knot tightened in my stomach. The phone had been functional, battery full, memory ample, yet the file was irrevocably corrupted during the crucial time frame. A few nights later, resolve hardened into confrontation. Near midnight, I commenced my rounds as usual, but lingered deliberately in certain spots, straining my ears in the profound quiet. I sought to provoke the phenomenon, to see if the steps would manifest while I occupied the same floor. Initially, nothing. Ascending to the second floor, I stood motionless near the elevator bank, waiting. Then, unmistakably, the footfalls sounded above, on the third. I bolted up the stairwell, adrenaline surging, bursting onto the third-floor landing. The footsteps ceased abruptly. My muscles locked, the flashlight beam trembling in my unsteady hand. Every corner, every shadow, empty. A wave of dizziness washed over me, my legs suddenly weak. Forcing slow, deliberate breaths, I regained a semblance of composure and walked to the corridor's end, pressing a hand against the cold window pane. Below, the street lay draped in darkness, punctuated only by the hesitant flicker of a distant lamp. Occasional cars sliced through the night, their passage offering no solace. Turning, I surveyed the corridor once more. Stillness, utter stillness. Descending the stairs back toward my office, a thought crystallized concerning the pattern. The sequence, walk, pause, walk, it mirrored my own patrol methodology. First floor, second, third, though I varied my starting point, sometimes top down, sometimes bottom up. These spectral steps also progressed floor by floor, though not always concurrently with my own movements. The chilling suspicion dawned. They were mimicking me somehow, shadowing my routine with a slight temporal offset. As more nights bled one into the next, I observed the footsteps drawing nearer my ground floor refuge. Initially confined to the upper levels, they descended to the second floor, directly above my office. Then, inevitably, I heard them in the very corridor leading to my door. By the time they reached the ground floor hallway, raw panic simmered just beneath my skin. Each occurrence held me captive, heart pounding violently, eyes fixed on the door handle, anticipating its turn. It never moved, but the footsteps would halt just outside, a palpable presence lingering for moments before receding. One evening, I devised a new plan: film the monitors themselves with my phone, capturing the exact moment they succumbed to static as the footsteps sounded. Around 1:45, the familiar tread began on the ground floor. I aimed my phone at the monitor, displaying the hallway immediately outside my office. As the steps grew louder, closer, the monitor image flickered violently, then dissolved into gray, impenetrable noise. Through the static, I could still hear the footfalls approaching, then stopping just beyond the door. A second later, the static cleared, revealing the empty hallway once more. Reviewing my phone's recording confirmed it. Clear hallway, sudden static, coinciding with the audible steps, though the sound was distorted, glitch-ridden on the recording. Then clear hallway again. I saved the file, another piece of inexplicable evidence. Weeks devolved into a cycle of dread. My jumpiness became noticeable. My boss observed my fraying nerves, repeating his offer of a day shift. The pay cut was prohibitive. I needed the night wage. So, I endured. I introduced a radio into my office, hoping its low chatter might provide a buffer against the silence and its intrusions. It helped, marginally. The distinctiveness of the footsteps always cut through. One night, driven by a restless anxiety, I began my rounds earlier than usual, around 10:30, hoping to finish quickly and barricade myself in the office until dawn. First floor, second, then third, checking doors, peering into vacant offices. While securing a supply closet on the second floor, a sudden insight struck me with the force of a physical blow. The footsteps didn't just mimic my pattern, they replicated the exact path I had taken the previous night. To test this nascent theory, I deliberately deviated from my established routine. 4th floor first, then down to the 1st, up to the 3rd, then finally the 2nd, a consciously chaotic sequence. The following night, precisely as suspected, the footsteps commenced on the 4th floor, moved to the 1st, ascended to the 3rd, and concluded on the 2nd. The realization landed heavily in my chest, a cold weight of certainty. No rational explanation could contain this. It fractured my understanding of the possible, yet I fought to maintain outward calm. Armed with this disturbing knowledge, my patrols became strategic experiments. I'd subtly displace objects. A trash bin shifted slightly, a piece of tape affixed to the floor, hoping to observe any corresponding disturbance the following night. Occasionally, the markers would be returned to their original positions, though the cameras, predictably, offered only static during the critical moments. On a night crackling with tension, around 1 a.m., the steps descended the 3rd floor hallway. They traversed the 2nd floor directly overhead. Then, the sound shifted to the stairwell leading down to my level. I positioned myself beside my office door, flashlight extinguished, holding my breath, straining to remain utterly silent. My heart hammered, a frantic pulse echoing in my temples. The footsteps reached the corridor's end, paused for several agonizing seconds. I ceased breathing entirely. Then they resumed, heading back toward the stairs. Relief washed over me, cold and sharp, laced with an inexplicable dread. Keys jangling softly, I locked my office and gave chase, maintaining a cautious distance, fear warring with a desperate need to understand. My own shoes scuffed betrayingly on the linoleum as I tried to move with stealth. The footfalls ascended to the 2nd floor. I followed, heart climbing into my throat. As I reached the 2nd floor landing, the steps abruptly stopped. The corridor stretched before me, empty, silent. I stood there for a long minute, breathing raggedly, before methodically checking each office door along the hall. Nothing amiss, yet the unnerving sensation of being watched prickled my skin, raising the hairs on my arms. Defeated, I retreated to my office, sinking into the worn chair. The monitors glowed, clear and undisturbed. The remainder of the night passed in profound silence. I wrestled with the implications. The only conclusion that held firm, however fantastic, was that some unseen presence was meticulously mirroring my nightly rounds, my very footsteps, delayed by 24 hours. Why? How? The questions hung unanswered, breeding a deep, unshakable unease. By the following week, I was operating on sheer nerve, barely functional. I exhausted every possibility, scrutinizing the electrical grid, the ventilation shafts, the aged floorboards themselves. No mundane source revealed itself. Inquiries directed at the few remaining tenants yielded little. A couple admitted to hearing occasional noises, but dismissed them as my own movements. Their indifference amplified my isolation. The breaking point arrived during a midnight patrol of the 2nd floor. I moved cautiously, listening intently for the prelude to the nightly haunting. Then they began, on the 1st floor. But this time, the usual measured pace was gone, replaced by a quickening tread, ascending the stairs rapidly. I froze mid-corridor, flashlight gripped so tightly my knuckles ached white. The footsteps reached the 2nd floor landing, paused. A primal instinct screamed retreat. I backed away slowly, breath catching in ragged gasps. Then they moved toward me, step by deliberate step, matching the exact pace I employed when walking this very hallway. My chest constricted. The thudding of my own heart deafened me. I spun and fled, stumbling toward the nearest stairwell leading down. Racing back to my office, I slammed the door, fumbling with the lock. On the monitor, the camera feed for the corridor dissolved into static. Through the electronic hiss, I heard the footsteps arrive, stopping directly outside my door. My hands trembled so violently, the flashlight slipped from my grasp, clattering onto the floor. As I bent to retrieve it, flicking its beam back on, the footsteps moved away, receding down the hall. They simply left. Now, each night unfolds the same. I wait for the footfalls to commence. I track their progress, log the times, watch the monitors glitch into oblivion. There seems nothing else to do. No one is ever visible, yet the steps faithfully retrace my path from the night before. They always arrive, sometimes seeming closer, more insistent. The how and the why remain terrifyingly obscure. I know only that when midnight deepens, my nerves fray, every creak and sigh of the old building amplified by anticipation. This is my reality now. I continue the work, tethered by necessity, by the need for a paycheck. But I cannot escape the chilling certainty that something walks these halls with me, a spectral echo of my own existence, endlessly retracing my steps. And with each passing night, the logical explanations fade further, leaving only the cold presence and the sound of my own footsteps, reverberating in the hollow dark. Mud, caked, incongruous prints staining the threshold of our sanctuary, leading inward. Ilara and I had crossed that threshold barely an hour ago, our boots clean, our arrival untainted by the mire clinging now to the rough-hewn planks, a coldness utterly separate from the crisp alpine air, coiled deep within my gut as I traced their path with my eyes. Months we had yearned for this escape, this dissolution into quietude. The city, with its relentless abrasion, had worn us thin. Here, nestled miles from any soul, this secluded haven promised restoration. No insistent buzz of connection, no digital tether, just the murmur of the forest, Ilara, and the profound luxury of silence. The cabin itself was a study in rustic charm, precisely as the flickering online images had shown. A hearth of massive stones dominating one wall, a kitchen promising simple feasts, windows framing an unbroken panorama of whispering pines. While we unpacked, shedding the city's psychic weight with each folded garment, smiles passed between us, easy and full of nascent peace. But the sight of those muddy intrusions shattered the calm, replacing it with a prickling apprehension. "Ilara," I called, striving for a casual tone that felt utterly false on my tongue. "Were you outside just now, while I brought in the last bags?" She emerged from the bedroom doorway, her brow furrowed in mild confusion. "No. Why do you ask?" My gesture directed her gaze downward. Recognition, then alarm, widened her eyes. "Maybe the people who cleaned before we arrived?" The suggestion hung weakly in the air, frayed with doubt. I shook my head. They tracked towards the door, Ilara, not away. Someone stood here after the cleaners left. An uneasy hour dissolved as we combed through the cabin's interior, seeking any disruption, any sign of violation. Yet nothing. Windows remained intact, locks undisturbed, our belongings untouched. Only those damnable footprints bore witness to an unwelcome presence. Twilight bled through the tall pines as we attempted to reclaim our stolen peace. I coaxed flames to life in the great stone fireplace, while Ilara orchestrated dinner. We ate bathed in the unsteady glow of candlelight, shadows dancing like specters on the log walls. We spoke of anticipated hikes, of trout hopefully lurking in clear streams, of constellations waiting to be unveiled by cloudless nights. Beneath the surface of our words, however, her tension hummed, a palpable counterpoint to the crackling fire. Her gaze flickered constantly towards the darkening windows. The cabin's settling groans made her flinch. "It's nothing, likely," I offered, my hand finding hers across the small table. "A hiker, maybe lost, looking for directions. We're secure here." She managed a nod, a fleeting smile that failed to ignite her eyes. "You're right, it's foolish to worry." Exhaustion from the journey and the day's unsettling discovery pulled us towards sleep early, but repose proved elusive. Each nocturnal sound, an owl's solemn query, the sibilance of wind through leaves, the sharp snap of a distant twig, echoed unnaturally loud in the profound stillness. Just as consciousness began to fray, I heard it. A muted thud from beyond the cabin walls, the sound of something substantial meeting the earth. My eyes flew open, pulse hammering against my ribs. "Did you hear that?" Ilara whispered beside me, her voice taut. A silent nod was my only answer as I slid from the warmth of the bed. Heart thudding, I crept to the nearest window, peering cautiously into the enveloping dark. The moon remained veiled, plunging the surrounding woods into deep, impenetrable shadow. Silence stretched, thick and expectant. Then, a flicker of motion at the clearing's edge. A form, scarcely more than a concentration of darkness against the lesser dark, shifted between the trees. As I watched, transfixed, it paused. I could have sworn it pivoted, facing our small, vulnerable cabin directly. Recoiling from the glass, my mouth suddenly arid, I hissed back to Ilara, "Someone's out there!" She sat bolt upright, clutching the blankets like a shield. "Reese, what do we do?" Options scrambled through my mind, stark and few. Miles separated us from aid, technology rendered useless. Our vehicle sat outside, a potential escape route, yet reaching it meant traversing the very ground where that watcher lurked. "Barricade," I decided, the word sharp in the tense air. "Block the doors, shutter the windows. Maybe they'll just leave." The ensuing minutes were a blur of frantic activity. Furniture scraped against the floorboards as we shoved heavy pieces against the doors. Thick wooden shutters slammed closed, plunging the interior into near-total darkness, punctuated only by the frantic beat of my own heart. With every scrape and thud, I braced for the shattering retort of glass, the splintering crack of wood under assault. But an unnerving quiet persisted outside. As I wedged a sturdy chair beneath the handle of the rear door, Ilara's urgent voice came from the main room. "Reese, look, quickly!" I rushed to her side. She stood by the front window, peering through a narrow slit between the newly closed shutters. Following her gaze towards the small patch of earth illuminated by the porch light we'd left burning, my blood turned to ice. scrawled crudely in the dirt, as if by a finger or a pointed stick. A message lay stark and undeniable. "We see you." "Oh God," Ilara whimpered, a fragile sound in the heavy silence. What could they possibly want? I pulled her back from the window, my thoughts racing, chaotic. This wasn't random, not a lost hiker, not a curious beast. This was targeted, calculated. But why us? A sudden, violent bang erupted against the front door, making us both physically jump. Another followed, then a third. Heavy, deliberate impacts. Someone, or something, was determined to breach our flimsy fortress. "The bedroom," I commanded, seizing Ilara's hand. "Now!" We fled to the rear of the cabin, slamming the solid bedroom door shut, the lock clicking home with unnerving finality. I threw my weight against the heavy oak dresser, shoving it across the floor until it jammed against the door, the wood groaning in protest. The assault on the front door ceased abruptly, replaced by a silence that felt even more menacing. Ilara and I huddled together on the bed, ears straining for the slightest sound of movement within the cabin. "What if they get inside?" she whispered, her voice trembling uncontrollably. My hand closed around the reassuring heft of the hunting knife I'd packed. "They won't touch you," I promised, injecting a confidence into my voice that my hammering heart belied. The silence stretched, taut and suffocating, measured only by our ragged breaths. Then a new sound emerged, soft, stealthy footfalls moving through the main room. They paused directly outside our barricaded door. Ilara buried her face against my shoulder, stifling a sob. I raised the knife, muscles coiled, ready. The door remained still. Instead, a voice spoke, a low rasp that scraped against the silence, disturbingly near. "We know you're in there. Come on out. Make this easier on yourselves." I swallowed, forcing the tremor from my own voice. "Who are you? What is it you want?" A chuckle answered, utterly devoid of warmth or humor. "Who we are isn't important. What we want, that's simple enough. We want you." My mind floundered, grasping for logic in the encroaching nightmare. Robbers? Kidnappers? Some unhinged local faction? Nothing aligned. "Listen," I tried, desperation edging my tone. "We don't have much. Take the car, whatever valuables you find. Just leave us be, please." Another laugh, this one echoed by others. There were more than one. "Oh, it's not about your money," the primary voice replied, laced with chilling amusement. "This concerns something far more precious. Now, are you coming out peaceably, or do we retrieve you?" I looked at Ilara, saw the stark terror reflected in her eyes, and knew. "If we go out, they take us both," I whispered urgently. "I'll make a noise, a diversion. When I do, you run, straight for the car. Drive, don't look back, don't stop for anything." She shook her head fiercely, eyes wide with panic. "No, Reese, I won't leave you." "You must," I insisted, my grip tightening on her arm. "It's the only way." Before she could protest further, I surged towards the bedroom window. Drawing a deep, steadying breath, I brought the butt of the knife down hard against the glass pane. The shattering explosion ripped through the night's quiet. Surprised shouts erupted from outside, followed by the sound of running feet. "Now!" I roared, wrenching the wooden shutters open. Elara hesitated only a fraction of a second, then scrambled through the jagged opening. I saw her fleetingly, a pale shape against the darkness, sprinting across the clearing towards the car. Turning back towards the bedroom door, I heard the dresser scraping, being forced aside. The door burst inward, framing dark figures against the dim light from the main room. Before I could react, something heavy connected violently with the side of my head. The world fractured, then dissolved into blackness. Consciousness returned with the improbable warmth of sunlight on my face. Birds chirped with maddening cheerfulness beyond the shattered window. My head throbbed viciously. Dried blood stiffened my hair. Stumbling upright, I scanned the cabin. Empty. No sign of our assailants. No sign of Elara. But outside, the space where our car had been parked was vacant. Relief warred with sickening dread. She'd made it. She was away. I staggered out into the bright morning air, desperate for any clue, any explanation. My gaze fell upon the thick trunk of a towering pine near the cabin's edge. My breath hitched, carved deep into the bark. The letters, stark and menacing, was a final message. "She's safe for now. We'll be in touch." My knees buckled. I sank onto the damp earth, overwhelmed by a terrifying amalgam of relief and utter horror. Elara was alive, but this ordeal, this nightmare was terrifyingly unfinished. Staring at the ominous words etched into the living wood, a single, chilling question reverberated through the sudden, awful silence. What had we stumbled into? That derelict cafeteria began its insidious crawl into my awareness perhaps a fortnight ago. I was shuffling through the security bottleneck, the air thick with the metallic tang of the aging industrial complex, when fragments of conversation snagged my ear, talk of peculiar resonances emanating from the old commissary. Initially, I dismissed it. Rumors breed like mold in the damp corners of this place, a sprawling carcass of brick and steel riddled with dormant chambers. Unsettling acoustics are the norm. Pipes groan like restless sleepers. Vents exhale low drones. The very framework sighs under the weight of night. Such mundane hauntings never troubled me, yet this particular dining hall resonated differently from the outset. Later that day, navigating the main artery of the building, a familiar chill prickled my skin. The overzealous air conditioning, a constant presence. Above, fluorescent tubes sputtered, casting unreliable light, a testament to deferred maintenance. Down the length of the corridor loomed the cafeteria entrance, a hulking slab of steel, its paint ravaged by time, scarred and peeling. A ponderous thing, it invariably protested its opening with a protracted squeal that reverberated down the empty passage, unnerving when solitude was your only companion. I applied pressure. The groan echoed. Stepping across the threshold, the immediate impression was one of pervasive dimness. Though overhead fixtures were present, many bulbs were extinguished or fading, casting long skeletal shadows. Rows of long tables, flanked by benches, stood like silent sentinels in the gloom. Towards the far end, an anomaly. Several tables bore plates and cutlery, starkly white and silver against the dust. despite the utter absence of diners. A fleeting thought, perhaps remnants left by hurried workers, or an oversight by the cleaning staff, didn't quite settle the disquiet blooming within me, a subtle trespasser's guilt. Around the midday meal hour, drawn by a morbid curiosity about those phantom place settings, I returned. The newer, renovated wing typically drew the lunchtime crowd. This sector remained largely forsaken. Yet the plates lingered in my mind. Inside, the emptiness was profound, weighted. The air hung heavy, stale, infused with the ghost of long-abandoned food, a musty, cloying odor that made my eyes water slightly. More tables were now set, I observed, and dark, irregular smudges marred their surfaces, resembling blooms of rust. The cutlery, knives, forks, spoons, lay in precise, regimented lines, yet dulled, tarnished, as if untouched for generations. I drifted between the tables, searching for any sign of freshness, any explanation. No actual sustenance was visible, only those unsettling reddish-brown stains that evoked dried sauces, or perhaps the slow decay of metal itself. From a distant corner, a faint, intermittent rattling teased the silence. I moved towards it, towards the kitchen area demarcated by a wide service window and a utilitarian metal counter. Peering through the grimy glass revealed antiquated apparatus, behemoth stoves, ovens of a forgotten design, a refrigerator whose seal likely hadn't been broken in years. As I reached the kitchen doorway, the rattling ceased abruptly. My hand found the light switch. A flick yielded nothing but a faint, electrical hum. The bulbs remained stubbornly dark. I stood motionless for a minute, listening. Silence reigned, save for the erratic buzz and flicker of a single fluorescent tube overhead. No draft stirred the stagnant air. No movement betrayed another presence. Still, the undeniable sensation of being observed prickled the back of my neck, a phantom weight just behind me. I spun around, heart leaping. Only the vacant expanse of the dining hall met my gaze. A tremor started in my hands. My palms grew slick, my throat constricted. Retreating towards the main area, the smell of decay intensified, a nauseating wave that tightened my stomach. Later, mentioning the meticulously arranged yet empty tables to colleagues earned me only perplexed stares. One offered a mundane explanation, detritus from former occupants. Another cautioned me away from the old wing entirely, citing pervasive mold and rot, a potential hazard to health. No one admitted to hearing anything beyond the building's usual groans and sighs. Self-doubt began to creep in. Was I merely projecting unease onto benign neglect? The following day, however, brought an experience that defied rationalization. I was passing the cafeteria late in the afternoon. Our shifts often bled into the early evening hours. The corridor stretched before me, hushed, my own footfalls the only sound. Then it began. A distinct clinking, the unmistakable chime of forks and knives striking ceramic. Not the isolated sound of one or two, but a layered cacophony, suggesting a room bustling with diners, silverware scraping against plates in a busy rhythm. It evoked the ambience of a crowded eatery, a stark contrast to the known desolation of this place. The sound swelled, echoing towards me. Gooseflesh pebbled my arms. I rounded the corner, stopping before the heavy steel door. The clatter was louder here, possessing a steady, purposeful cadence, as if a multitude were truly engaged in a meal. Hesitation tightened my chest. My breath grew shallow. My hand closed over the cold metal knob. I pushed. The door's protesting shriek sliced through the phantom din, and instantly, as if a switch had been thrown, the clinking vanished into absolute silence. My eyes swept the room, empty, utterly empty. Yet the tables were set anew, and their number had increased. I counted at least 12 place settings now, distributed across 3 tables. Each plate bore the familiar rust-hued blemishes. The cutlery appeared even older, more heavily tarnished, yet arranged with unnerving precision, poised for imminent use. I advanced slowly, the hammering of my heart a physical force against my ribs. Overhead, the lights buzzed their discordant tune. The stale odor was more potent than before, acrid, reminiscent of gravy left to congeal and spoil in oppressive heat. My stomach churned violently. Again, no visible food, only the pervasive stench of something ancient and putrid. My eyes stung. Backing away, fighting a rising gorge, I wondered who, or what, was perpetuating this bizarre ritual. I scanned the floor for footprints, any sign of recent passage, but found only undisturbed dust and scattered bits of debris. I resolved to report this. Surely security would investigate. But upon reaching their office, I found them preoccupied with some other minor crisis. My concerns were met with casual dismissal. One guard quipped about cafeteria ghosts having fun at my expense. Another curtly advised me to cease exploring restricted areas. Frustration mingled with a hot flush of embarrassment. That night, sleep offered no refuge. The image of those waiting plates haunted my thoughts, accompanied by the phantom scraping of forks on ceramic. Shadowy figures populated the tables in my dreams. I awoke with a jolt, drenched in cold sweat, sheets clinging damply to my skin, staring into the oppressive darkness of my room, struggling to regulate my ragged breathing. I had to return. The next day, I needed to ascertain whether my sanity was fraying or if something tangible, however strange, was occurring. Despite feeling drained and brittle, I made my way directly to the cafeteria first thing in the morning. The corridors were largely deserted at this early hour. I noticed immediately that the heavy steel door stood slightly ajar, an anomaly, as its weight usually ensured it swung fully shut. Slipping inside quietly, cautiously, I was met by air thick with a new scent, something burnt, acrid. My eyes adjusted to the persistent gloom. The tables, set once more, displayed plates that now appeared chipped around the edges, the utensils bearing deeper, darker stains. Had they always been chipped, overlooked in my previous visits? Then, a whisper, faint but distinct, breathed near the threshold of my hearing. My name, Silas. My heart stuttered. I froze, every muscle tensing. The whisper seemed to originate from the corner near the kitchen window. I moved towards it, step by deliberate step, the soles of my boots crunching on what felt like fractured shards of porcelain scattered across the floor. Reaching the counter, I peered over. The whispering ceased, though the sound of my name lingered, an echo in my mind's ear. Gooseflesh tightened the skin on my arms. The hairs on my nape prickled. A tremor ran through my legs as I tried to steady my breathing. Leaning further, searching the shadows behind the counter, I found nothing but a stack of dust-laden trays. Relaying the whispered name to a friend at work elicited only laughter and the familiar suggestion that I was overworked. But the certainty of the experience was absolute. I resolved then to capture proof. After my shift concluded, phone in hand, camera app open, I returned. Standing in the corridor, I drew a slow, deliberate breath and hit record. Pushing the heavy door open, the weak beam of my phone's flashlight cut a trembling cone through the oppressive dimness. A chill, unrelated to the ambient temperature, seeped into my hands. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm. Faintly, almost subliminally, the clinking returned, softer this time, more distant. I panned the phone slowly, methodically, capturing the rows of tables, the empty chairs. Visually, nothing. Later, review confirmed the recording captured only silence, punctuated by my own breathing. Yet in the moment, the sound persisted, a delicate, faraway scraping of metal on ceramic. I approached the first table, illuminating the plates. Dust lay thick upon them. The utensils bore faint, mottled spots, rust, or perhaps dried residue of something indeterminate. I reached out, my fingers brushing against a fork. It felt gritty, rough. Minute flakes of tarnish clung to my skin. Bringing my hand closer, I detected a faint metallic odor. I wiped my fingers on my trousers, a profound unease settling deep within me. Moving to the second table, the place settings were spaced with unnerving uniformity, each meticulously prepared. My flashlight beam swept across them, snagging on a smear near the center of one plate. Dark brown, almost black, with a crusted, desiccated texture. My stomach lurched. Leaning closer for a better view, my phone's flashlight began to flicker erratically. Tapping the device yielded no change. The light pulsed, died, then flared weakly. My name echoed in my head again, a sibilant whisper devoid of a discernible source. I whirled around, scanning the empty expanse behind me. Only shadowed tables receding into the gloom. A surge of raw panic seized me. I bolted, stumbling towards the exit. The heavy door slammed shut behind me with its customary groan, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. I nearly collided with a passing co-worker who recoiled slightly. "Silas, you look like you've seen a ghost." I could only stammer about the cafeteria being deeply wrong. He just shrugged, his indifference a palpable thing. It struck me then with stark clarity. No one else perceived this. They were either willfully blind, or I was truly becoming unmoored. For the next several days, I actively avoided that wing of the complex, immersing myself in routine, attempting to purge the cafeteria from my thoughts. But it refused to be ignored. The haunting began to bleed beyond its confines. Standing in the brightly lit break room of the modern wing, I'd catch the faint, spectral clinking of utensils. Asking nearby colleagues yielded only confused negatives. My appetite evaporated. The mere thought of food conjured the phantom stench of decay, forcing me to push my meals away. Uneaten. My hands developed an intermittent tremor. Recalling the state of those plates could trigger sudden, drenching sweats. After another week, the need for validation, or perhaps closure, became overwhelming. I had to try again. I would document it thoroughly, photos, video, irrefutable evidence for skeptical eyes. If the recordings showed nothing amiss, then perhaps a doctor was indeed the next step. I timed my visit for the late afternoon, hoping the angled sunlight filtering through the high, clear-story windows near the ceiling might offer some measure of clarity, some natural illumination against the oppressive shadows. Reaching the cafeteria door, the corridor was deserted. I pushed it open, steeling myself. Inside, the scene was both familiar and terrifyingly escalated. The tables were set, yes, but their number had inexplicably grown. 2 additional rows now occupied the rear of the vast room, seemingly materialized from nowhere. All bore the same tarnished plates and cutlery. I counted quickly, numbly, at least 20 place settings. A constricting band tightened around my throat. The odor of stale decay was suffocating now, thick as damp, rotting cloth. Covering my nose and mouth with my sleeve, I stepped forward. Phone raised, video recording initiated. I aimed the lens at the tables, panning slowly, then tilting up towards the buzzing lights, attempting a comprehensive capture of the space. My voice, low and trembling, narrated what I saw. My hands shook, but I forced myself to maintain the recording. Passing each table, I noticed fresh marks on the plates, some resembling newly formed rust blooms, others like wet smears of some dark, viscous substance. I drifted towards the kitchen counter again, phone light probing the shadows. That's when I heard it, clear as a spoken word right beside me. Silas. A sibilant hiss, a breathy, intimate summons. I jerked the phone around violently, desperate to capture the speaker. Nothing. No one. My chest seized, breath catching, heart hammering against my ribs, pulse thundering in my ears. The phone screen displayed only the dim, silent tables, the vacant chairs, the meticulously placed, tarnished utensils. Not a soul in sight. Then, a sudden eruption of clinks, louder, more frantic than ever before. A cacophony of dozens of forks and knives striking plates, scraping, clattering over and over. My scalp prickled, a cold wave washing down my spine. My knees felt perilously weak. I stared, transfixed, at the tables, all utterly still, inanimate. Yet the sound raged, an auditory hallucination of a spectral banquet in full swing. My phone, I knew instinctively, would capture only muffled static. My name came again, a slow, drawn-out whisper that seemed to curl directly into my ear. I spun around, fully expecting a face inches from my own. Emptiness greeted me. My mouth was desert dry, swallowing felt impossible. My breath hitched in short, sharp gasps. The clinking intensified, reaching a feverish, chaotic pitch. It was unbearable. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing like panicked drumbeats off the tiled walls. Bursting back into the relative sanity of the corridor, the sound instantly ceased, cut off the moment I crossed the threshold. My phone remained clutched in my hand, still recording. With trembling fingers, I pressed stop, leaning against the cool wall, panting, fighting waves of nausea. Later, I forced myself to review the footage. It showed precisely what I'd done. Walking through the dim cafeteria, my own shaky voice narrating the scene, describing the tables, the stains, the oppressive atmosphere. But the audio track was eerily quiet, a faint background buzz, likely the dying fluorescent lights, but none of the intense, overwhelming clatter, none of the chilling whispers that had assaulted my senses. My voice was there, clear enough, documenting an experience the recording flatly denied. Proof of my presence, yes, but nothing more. I still work in the complex. I still pass that heavy steel door, sometimes multiple times a day. I never go inside. My story remains mine alone, dismissed as stress, imagination, or the predictable quirks of an old structure. But the knowing is absolute. Sometimes, late in the evening, when the building settles into its nocturnal quiet, I catch a faint whiff of that same stale, decaying odor drifting down the corridor. My pulse quickens, my steps hasten. The phantom rattle of spectral silverware echoes not in the hallway, but in the chambers of my memory. There's a palpable sense, a cold certainty, that something within that room continues its silent ritual, resetting the tables, waiting, and it calls my name still, in those quiet moments, an invitation to a meal without end. When it happens, my chest constricts, my stomach twists into a cold knot, my skin turns clammy. I tell myself not to listen, not to look, never to cross that threshold again. But the thought lingers, persistent and chilling. I cannot explain it. I only know it is real. I heard the sounds. I smelled the rot. I touched the tarnished decay. Something in that cafeteria sets the stage. Night after night. Forever prepared. Forever waiting. And I cannot shake the dreadful conviction that it is waiting for me. Truth be told, stopping held no appeal. From half a mile distant, Silas Creek presented as a skeletal husk of a town. Windows blinded with plywood, roofs hunched like broken spines, rusted automotive carcasses bleeding into the roadside weeds. My phone's cartography insisted the place was uninhabited, a declaration the landscape readily confirmed. Yet the highway had unspooled beneath my tires for unbroken hours. Respite was necessary. A low whisper of caution murmured in my mind, but fatigue won out, and I veered onto the exit ramp. Dusk bled across the sky. My plan was simple. Stretch cramped limbs, perhaps locate a secluded spot for a few hours' rest, and merge back onto the asphalt artery at dawn. That was the intention, anyway. I navigated the main thoroughfare, its pavement fractured, tenacious green life thrusting through the fissures. Structures lining the street were predominantly marred by shattered glass or crudely patched wounds of timber. The corner gas station stood eviscerated, pumps ripped out, signage gone, only a battered metal canopy remaining like a forgotten monument. An old welcome sign, half its lettering lost to time or vandals, offered a greeting so forlorn it nearly provoked a grim chuckle. The setting sun cast long, oblique shadows, distorting shapes and lending the air a palpable sense of desertion, as if the town were caught in some temporal stasis. My vehicle came to rest before what might once have been a diner. Its panes were opaque with grime, the door canted at a precarious angle from a single hinge. Easing out of the car, I arched my back, the stale air thick with dust and the scent of old, decaying wood, offering little refreshment. My shoulders ached from the prolonged drive. No flicker of movement, no human sign disturbed the stillness. A glance at my phone reaffirmed the area's abandoned status. Signal was weak. A fragile thread barely sufficient to reveal the nearest motel lay an hour's journey away. Departure seemed logical, imperative even. Yet a peculiar magnetism held me. The allure of desolation, perhaps? A need to decipher the narrative of departure etched into the decay, to find some echo of the lives that had ceased here. As the sun dipped fully below the horizon, the sky flushed a bruised, sullen red. I began a circumambulation of the block, passing crumbling storefronts, fallen signs half buried in debris, and scattered piles of fractured brick. Silence reigned, broken only by a faint breeze stirring dust devils in its wake. Testing one building, I nudged a door inward. It opened onto a hollow space, furnished solely with overturned chairs and tables. Remnants of a small office, maybe, or a modest shop. Little remained to tell its story. Stepping back into the cooling air, a shiver traced my spine as the temperature dropped. The first discordant note struck when I registered a spectral luminescence emanating from a window across the street. It was muted, akin to lamplight filtered through distance, yet its source remained hidden. My pulse quickened. The maps were adamant, uninhabited. Drawn closer, I found the window too filmed with neglect to offer a clear view. Cupping my hands around my eyes, pressing my face near the cold glass, I strained against the dying light. Then, movement. A fleeting form, indistinct. A mere anthropomorphic shadow gliding past within. Definitely human-scaled. Instinctively, I rapped on the adjacent door. The wood rattled loosely in its frame, but held fast. I waited, the fine hairs on my nape prickling. Silence answered. I tried the handle, locked. Circling around into the side alley, my feet crunched over indeterminate rubble. No side entrance presented itself, only more boarded-up windows. It was then I became aware of other lights, a constellation of faint glows materializing in windows further down the street. Not the assertive brightness of occupied dwellings, but a subdued radiance, scarcely visible behind drawn curtains or makeshift barriers. An entire neighborhood seemed to stir awake with the encroaching dark, yet no sound accompanied this awakening. No figures emerged into the twilight. A profound disquiet settled over me. Primal instinct screamed retreat, back to the car, back to the known highway. But a countercurrent, a burgeoning compulsion, urged me onward. An explanation felt necessary. Squatters, perhaps? A hidden community dwelling off the grid, unknown to the digital world. Possibilities flickered through my mind, yet none resonated with the unnerving atmosphere. This felt less like furtive survival, and more like a concerted pattern, each house contributing its own wan ember to the collective twilight. I pressed on, deeper into the town's decaying heart. Down the main road, I walked, past houses shedding leprous paint from their walls, their yards delineated by splintered barriers. The sun had fully surrendered now, compelling me to switch on my torch, its beam slicing through the gloom, illuminating the treacherous ground. Periodically, I'd pause, directing the light towards a window. Sometimes, a furtive motion flickered within. Other times, only the persistent faint glow answered my scrutiny. My mouth grew dry, sweat slicked my palms. An insistent awareness of being watched prickled at my back, prompting frequent, nervous glances over my shoulder. Nothing materialized from the shadows. Nearing a small 2-story house, I detected a sound from within. Footsteps. A slow, cadenced tread. Pressing my ear to the front door, I held my breath. The footsteps ceased abruptly. I recoiled, my heart thrumming against my ribs. The urge to call out was strong, but my voice lodged itself in my throat. Skirting the side of the house, careful to minimize noise, I found a window not entirely sealed by boards. Standing on tiptoe, I peered through the narrow gap. A figure moved across the room, its profile etched momentarily against the dim interior light. Male, it seemed, clad in an old jacket, though details remained elusive. He appeared to be pacing, a restless patrol in the gloom, before vanishing into an adjoining room. The angle prevented me from seeing where he went. I swallowed hard, the heavy beat of my pulse pounding in my ears. Gathering myself, I knocked on the wooden siding. "Hello?" My voice was a low tremor in the silence. No response. A wave of panic surged, cold and sharp. Every nerve ending screamed, "Leave!" Yet I forced myself to step back, to reassess. Perhaps they were wary of strangers, frightened. But why hide so completely in a place the world had declared dead? Taking a deep, steadying breath, I moved on, mind racing, striving for calm, for observation. Further along, I noticed a distinct tremor in my limbs. The dust beneath my boots made a continuous grinding report with each step, a sound that amplified my skittishness. Left and right, my gaze darted, the sensation of unseen scrutiny intensifying. Lights now glowed behind windows all along the block, lending the street a suffocating quality, as if I had strayed into a parallel version of reality, familiar in form, but dissonant in feeling. My gut clenched, my throat felt raw. The question hammered relentlessly. Who were these inhabitants? Were they merely inhabitants? I tried more doors. Most remained stubbornly locked or jammed fast. One yielded, groaning open into a hallway, choked with the jumbled wreckage of overturned furniture. I stepped inside, the torch beam dancing across the chaos. Floorboards creaked ominously beneath my weight. The air was thick with a spore-laden, mildewy scent. Wallpaper peeled away from the walls like sloughing skin. The ceiling bore the dark stains of water damage. From deeper within the house, a low thrum reached my ears, an insidious vibration, perhaps electrical. Following the sound led me to what must have been a small living area. In the corner, perched on a stand, sat a dust-coated television. Its screen emitted a faint, ghostly light, displaying nothing but snowy chaos. The hum emanated from this relic, alive but disconnected. My flesh crawled at the sight. Approaching, I located the power button and pressed it. The screen went dark. The hum died. I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath. Who had left it on, and why? A trespasser's guilt washed over me. Time to leave this place. I turned, but a sound from the second floor froze me in place. A scraping noise, soft yet deliberate. A measured friction. My torch beam wavered in my trembling grip. "Is someone here?" I called out, my voice thin. Silence answered. One hesitant step towards the staircase, but a primal warning shrieked in my subconscious. "Do not go up!" My arms felt leaden, my heart hammered violently enough to ache. Forcing myself to turn, I retreated, pulling the door closed behind me, sealing the silence within. Back on the street, the lights in the neighboring houses seemed to have intensified, their glows brighter, almost watchful, as if reacting to my intrusion. Each illuminated window felt like an eye fixed upon me. Wiping sweat from my brow, my hand came away, damp. The decision solidified. Return to the car, drive away now. But as I neared the derelict diner where I'd parked, I saw that illumination had bloomed there too. Pressing my face to the glass door, I could see the interior remained a disaster of gutted stalls and scattered refuse. But now a single overhead light in the kitchen area beyond the counter stuttered with a sickly, intermittent pulse. I could hear its faint insectal drone. Pushing the door inward cautiously, my boots crunched on unseen debris. The smell was a nauseating blend of rancid grease and damp earth. I passed the counter, noting a moldering bill of fare lying open on the floor. Its text faded, images of long-forgotten meals mocking the decay. Behind the counter, a short hallway led to the kitchen, the source of the spasmodic light. Moving slowly, breath caught, I navigated the sticky floor. Reaching the kitchen doorway, I saw the fluorescent tube overhead, flickering erratically. The kitchen itself was stark, empty save for antiquated appliances coated in grime. Relief began to wash over me. Nothing here. Then my eyes snagged on a form huddled in the far corner by the sink. Folded low, clothes dark, perhaps merely dust-laden. The face was obscured, but I could discern the faint rhythm of shallow respirations. I tensed, gripping my torch like a makeshift cudgel. "Hello?" The word was barely out of my mouth when the figure exploded upwards, a blur of motion hurtling towards the back door. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. The person shoved the rear exit open and vanished into the darkness outside. I stood rooted, gasping for breath. This was the first undeniable close encounter, tangibly present. Yet no word, no revealed face, just panicked flight. Exiting the diner, I scanned the alleyway behind it. Empty. The sense of isolation returned, sharpened now by a knot of dread constricting in my stomach. Was I in genuine peril? Out here, vulnerable amidst the labyrinthine shadows and blind corners, harm could come easily. The streets felt actively malevolent, the silent houses brooding over me. Fatigue warred with adrenaline, my eyes straining, constantly sweeping windows, doorways, searching for any sign of movement. My threshold was reached. I turned and walked swiftly towards my car, resisting the urge to break into a full run. My hand trembled as I reached for the door handle. That's when I saw them, impressions in the thick dust coating the ground near the driver's side door. Footprints, not mine, slighter, the tread suggesting sneakers. They led around the vehicle, then simply vanished. My pulse hammered in my ears. Wrenching the car door open, I scrambled inside, slamming and locking it immediately. The engine roared to life. A frantic scan of the street revealed only emptiness, punctuated by the wan glow from countless windows. Shifting into reverse, I pulled away from the curb. Driving back down the main street felt like running a gauntlet. Every house I passed radiated that same faint light. Through the windows, I caught fleeting silhouettes, some gliding past, others standing unnervingly still. I kept my windows sealed, my speed steady. Escape was the only imperative. Questions cycled endlessly in my mind. Who were they? Why the secrecy? Why the silence? Reaching the edge of Silas Creek, the unsettling lights began to recede in my rearview mirror. An exhalation of release escaped me, though a residual tremor still coursed through my body. Hitting the highway felt like surfacing for air. My phone sprang back to life, reconnecting me to the outside world. I immediately searched for any information, any obscure footnote about Silas Creek, but found only the same stark narrative, forsaken decades prior, due to fiscal implosion or some unspecified environmental blight. The official record was a closed book, ending long ago. No reports of resettlement, no whispers of reclamation. Yet I had seen the lights, heard the footsteps, encountered the fleeing figure in the diner. This wasn't imagination. And that's why it refuses to release its grip. The knowledge gnaws at me. My flesh prickles when I recall the town slowly illuminating in the dark, the silent inhabitants stirring within. I can't shake the profound certainty that they were cognizant of my presence, observing my passage, waiting patiently for my departure. It has left me perpetually on edge. Sometimes, in dreams, I hear the low thrum of that television. Sometimes, I wake abruptly, drenched in sweat, convinced a figure stands just outside my window. I cannot let it rest. Already, I am plotting a return. I must unearth the truth. Every rational fiber screams that it is folly, dangerous folly, but the unanswered questions echo louder. No peace is possible until they are silenced. Next time, I will be better prepared. More provisions, superior illumination. Perhaps I can devise an inconspicuous means of entry into one of those houses. I need to confront them, commune with them, understand. Is it a hidden enclave surviving against the odds? Or something else entirely? Something otherworldly? Whatever it is, I need to bear witness. It sounds like madness, I know. The peril is undeniable. But Silas Creek has lodged itself deep within me, an obsessive splinter. Resolving the enigma has become paramount. I replay the sequence, the lights awakening, as if responding to the night, or perhaps to me. The silhouettes moving with deliberate, unhurried purpose, always just beyond clear sight. The figure in the diner, bolting not in fear, it seemed in retrospect, but almost in irritation at being discovered. That image persists, someone huddled in a corner, waiting. I need to confront the reality, however grotesque or bizarre it may prove to be. Staring into those spectral panes, lost in the gnawing questions, is no longer bearable. The only path forward leads back to Silas Creek, and return I will.